Eddard Stark stood in the great courtyard of Winterfell, his face grim and his eyes narrowed against the northern chill. The king was inside, feasting on meats and bread and washing them down with wine. It had been a long journey north from King's Landing for Robert Baratheon and his retinue. A long journey to entreat an old friend to accept a heavy burden. Lord Eddard knew in his bones that Robert's purpose here was not merely to show the realm the strength of the king's bond with House Stark. No, this was about the hand of the king, about Robert needing someone he trusted to keep the realm from tearing itself apart. Eddard felt the soft tug of the wind pulling at the fur on his cloak. It seemed to whisper caution in his ear. He closed his eyes momentarily, recalling the memories of the rebellion. The nights in campaign tents by candlelight, Robert laughing loudly and promising they would feast together upon victory. Then there was the day at the Trident when Robert had faced Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. All the ghosts of that war seemed to be swirling about him now, reminding him of friendships lost and sacrifices made. "Lord Stark," came a voice from behind him. One of the castle guards, a young man with a thin mustache, bowed low. "The king asks for you inside." Ned nodded and dismissed the guard with a gesture. He took a moment to gather himself. Inside, the great hall would be roaring with laughter and the clink of goblets. Robert would be waiting, expecting an answer. He'd come with the Lannisters at his side, and that in itself was enough to sow seeds of worry in Eddard's heart. The presence of Cersei, her brothers, and the golden-haired Prince Joffrey set all his senses on edge. More than once that evening, Eddard had found himself glancing at Jaime Lannister, recalling the rumors of how he'd once sat upon the Iron Throne after slaying the Mad King. Then there was the Queen, with her polite smiles that never seemed to reach her eyes. Even Tyrion Lannister's presence reminded Eddard that House Lannister's shadow fell long over the Seven Kingdoms. He inhaled deeply, steeling himself, then made his way back into the great hall. It was a cacophony of voices, feasting, and the wafting smell of roast boar. Torches crackled along the walls. Robert sat at the high table upon the dais, resplendent in a dark velvet tunic that strained around his considerable girth. The king's eyes lit up when he caught sight of Ned. "I was starting to wonder if you'd grown cold feet, old friend," Robert boomed, raising his goblet. There was a flush in his cheeks, and Eddard was certain the king had downed more than a little wine in his impatience. Ned mustered a ghost of a smile. "I never expected your grace to come so far north so soon after the passing of Lord Arryn," he said quietly. "It must have been a weary road." Robert shook his head. "The road was long, aye, but well worth it if it brings me to Winterfell. I've been wanting to see you, Ned. And you know why I'm here." Eddard nodded. He felt countless eyes on him. The king's, the Lannisters, his own people, and even more powerfully Catelyn's watchful gaze from where she sat. He noticed the slight furrow in his wife's brow. She too was anxious for how this might unfold. To take the office of Hand of the King would draw him far from Winterfell, from the north that he had been charged to protect. He recalled what had happened the last time the realm lost its hand, and how Jon Arryn's death was shrouded in questions. Robert signaled for more wine, though the serving boy fumbled nervously. The king did not seem to mind, focusing on Ned with an open, earnest smile. "Let's have it, then. You know my mind, and I know you've never been one to keep me guessing. Come, Ned, say you'll accept. I need you by my side." There was a hush in the hall, though no single person had willed it. Even the minstrels seemed to grow quieter, plucking at their lutes with caution, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Eddard swallowed, feeling the dryness in his throat. He glanced at his daughters, Sansa and Arya, seated near the dais. Sansa, bright-eyed as always, was half entranced by the golden-haired Prince Joffrey. Arya looked more bored than anything, her dark hair falling over her eyes as she tried to stealthily stab a piece of roast on her plate. Robb was out among the watchers, too, sitting near Bran and Rickon, while Jon Snow lingered further down the table with the other men-at-arms. Winterfell was full with all of his responsibilities, all the faces he loved. He met the king's gaze. He saw Robert's hope. Then he thought of the quiet message delivered by Raven from Lisa Arryn. hinting that the Lannisters had murdered her husband. He remembered how his father, Rickard Stark, had died in the South by the decree of the Mad King. The South had never been kind to House Stark, and something in Ned whispered that it would not be kind again. "My lord," Ned said slowly, "I am honored by the faith you show me, and by the trouble you've taken to come here, but I cannot accept this office. My place is in the north." A ripple of shock spread through the hall. The king's eyes widened. Robert gave a laugh, short and abrupt, as though expecting this was a jest. But Ned did not laugh with him. Silence settled again, except for the faint crackling of the torches and the hushed murmurs among those gathered. "You refuse," Robert managed, placing his goblet down heavily on the table. His voice was quieter now, tinged with confusion that carried an edge of anger. Ned stood firm. "I do, your grace. I can give you every hospitality that Winterfell may provide, but I cannot leave the north. My father died in the south. My brother died in the south. Jon Arryn, whom I loved like a second father, also met a dire fate there. I cannot forsake my duty here. The north is large, and my people need me as much as you do, if not more." Robert's expression darkened. He had never expected this answer. His chest heaved as though he were struggling to contain himself. He glanced around, as though searching for a reason that Ned might have said such a thing, then fixed him with a look that was half-wounded, half-enraged. "You honor-bound fool," Robert said at last, sighing. "I come all this way, expecting you to do your duty to the realm, and you deny me? You would leave me to suffer the vipers of King's Landing alone." His voice rose with each word, and the tension in the hall thickened. Ned stood unwavering. "My duty is first to the north, your grace. I am sorry." For a moment it seemed Robert might lunge across the table. Then he abruptly rose, shoving the bench back. The entire dais rattled with the sudden movement. "So be it," he snapped. Then, to the great discomfort of all gathered, the king of the Undulls and the first men turned on his heel and stalked out of the great hall, for guards hastening to follow. The silence was deafening. Cersei Lannister's green eyes flicked toward Ned, and there was a smoldering smile on her lips. Jaime Lannister, standing at a pillar near the high table, looked suspiciously amused. Tyrion simply sipped his wine, eyes dancing with curiosity. The lords and knights from the south exchanged knowing glances, but none dared break the hush. Finally, Ned turned to those watching. "I thank you all for your attendance tonight. Enjoy the feast as best you can." Then he slowly walked away, following the path the king had taken, determined to speak with him privately. Robert was pacing near the open doors leading to the courtyard, one hand pressed to the hilt of a dagger at his belt as though he was wrestling with the urge to cast it aside or perhaps use it. He spun around when Ned approached. There was a flush in the king's cheeks that the cold night air had nothing to do with. "Ned," Robert said, voice low and thick with anger or disappointment, "we were to rule the realm together. That was our dream, yours and mine and Jon's. Are you telling me you won't follow through on it? I trusted you, Ned. I need you." Eddard bowed his head but did not avert his eyes. "I do not abandon you, my friend. I swear if you have need of the north, you shall have it. My banners will answer your call. If there is war, if there is any threat to your reign, I will ride south with 10,000 men. But I cannot be your hand." Robert regarded him for a long moment. Then, weary, he let out a breath. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," he muttered. "Very well, you stubborn ass. Keep your precious north." He paused, a flicker of hurt crossing his features. "I am not sure I can forgive this, but by the gods, I'll have to accept it. I've no time to quarrel." The king pushed past Ned. Before he left, he threw over his shoulder. "I will decide on another hand, but do not think I won't remember this." With that, he strode into the night, the guards hurrying after him, leaving Lord Eddard Stark in the cold gloom of the corridor, wondering if he had done the right thing. In the days that followed, Robert tried to enjoy the hospitality of Winterfell, but it was clear that something had snapped between him and Ned. Where once there had been jest and easy camaraderie, now there was a strained politeness, overshadowed by frustration. Cersei often wore a knowing smile when she glimpsed the king glowering at Ned across the courtyard, as if she took some private satisfaction in the rift. Still, the king and his family remained for the time they had planned, intending to visit the crypts of Winterfell in memory of Lyanna Stark. They spoke little of the matter of the hand, and Robert did not mention who he might choose instead. Eddard felt a pang of guilt. He had refused his dearest friend in his hour of need, and that weighed heavily on his heart. But the sense of foreboding did not relent, and every time Ned glimpsed the Lannisters, he felt the stir of caution. One morning, while the king was out hunting, Catelyn Stark found her husband in his solar, poring over a letter. She shut the door behind her quietly. "My lord," she said softly, "have you spoken to him at all?" Ned shook his head. "He barely looks at me. I doubt there will be any more attempts to convince me. He's made his peace with my refusal, though I think not without resentment." Catelyn's gaze flicked to the parchment on the table. "Is that from Lisa?" Ned exhaled. "Yes, she insists that Jon was murdered and that the Lannisters had a hand in it. Were I to accept the handship, I might have delved deeper into the truth. Now, it may well be that the king picks a Lannister as hand, or someone else. Whatever the truth is, it may remain shrouded in secrets at the Red Keep." "Do you think he will choose Tywin Lannister?" she asked, her tone betraying alarm. "Or, Tywin is too powerful, and Robert knows better than to hand him the keys to the kingdom so plainly. But perhaps he will settle on Jaime Lannister, or another lord loyal to the crown. Varys, Baelish gods, who knows?" He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "I only know that I would rather keep my distance from that snake's pit." Catelyn moved behind him and placed her hands gently on his shoulders, as if to soothe his tension. "You have done what you think is best. You have always done so, Ned. For our family, for the North. Robert is a dear friend, and perhaps, in time, he will come to understand your reasons." Ned felt the warmth of her hands and allowed himself to close his eyes, drawing some comfort from her presence. "I can only hope, but I fear this is just the beginning of greater woes. If Lisa is right, if there's a conspiracy in King's Landing, then the realm is in danger." They left it at that for the moment, each weighed down by their own concerns. The king's party departed Winterfell a few days later, the roads muddy from recent rains. Robert did not exchange any heartfelt farewells with Ned. They merely clasped hands in a stiff, formal manner. Cersei and her children departed with minimal fuss. Tyrion Lannister, for his part, gave Ned a polite nod of acknowledgement before riding out with his family. Whatever the future held, the king had taken his court with him, leaving Winterfell quiet and brimming with a strange mixture of regret and relief. Seasons turned in their own slow, measured way. The air grew colder in the north, as it always did, but House Stark carried on its duties. Ned devoted himself to attending to the concerns of his bannermen, resolving disputes, ensuring the watch against wildlings was well-staffed, and caring for his own family. If it seemed that the rift between him and Robert would deepen, there was little Ned could do from so far away except hope that the king did not blame him too strongly. Yet he kept up his guard, expecting at any moment a summons from King's Landing that might drag him into the turmoil of southern politics. Bran continued his climbing about the walls of Winterfell, heedless of his mother's warnings. Arya and Sansa continued to practice needlework, at least until Arya snuck off to train with wooden swords with the Winterfell guards. Robb grew taller and stronger, taking on more of the responsibilities of a young lord, while Jon Snow, though still mindful of his place as a bastard in House Stark, grew more confident in his martial abilities. One crisp morning, news arrived by Raven that King Robert had chosen a new hand, Lord Renly Baratheon, the king's own younger brother. The message was short and written in a formal, officious tone, but it was genuine enough. Ned read the parchment twice, breathing a sigh of relief. He had worried Robert might appoint someone from House Lannister or someone else who would only exacerbate tension in the realm. Renly Baratheon was young, charismatic, and beloved in certain circles. Yet Ned could not help but question whether Renly possessed the caution and steadfastness for the role. Still, Renly was of Robert's blood. Perhaps that would keep the king from growing suspicious of his own hand. Maybe together they would rule in peace. Eddard Stark could only pray that it would be so. Rumors trickled north. Lord Tywin Lannister had seemingly withdrawn to Casterly Rock, though some said he was furious that the king had passed him over and named Renly instead. Jaime Lannister remained in the Kingsguard, close to Cersei. Tyrion Lannister roamed, traveling the roads on some errand or leisure, though the exact details were murky. The tensions in King's Landing persisted, especially around the royal court, but for a time, none of it touched Winterfell. Then another raven arrived, this time from Catelyn's sister in the Eyrie. The letter was panicked, full of references to suspicious visitors in King's Landing, a meltdown in the small council, and the possibility that the Lannisters were quietly shifting alliances. Lisa wrote that she feared the safety of her son, the young Lord of the Vale, if the realm became unstable. She pleaded for Ned to come south, to protect her, to root out the truth of Jon Arryn's death, to stand firm for Robert. Eddard read this letter in silence as the winds howled outside the tower window. He thought of the king's children, too, and the rumors that Joffrey was not Robert's son at all. He remembered how the coloring of the Baratheons was so famously dark-haired, how all of Robert's bastards around the realm bore that hallmark. But Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were all golden-haired. The seeds of suspicion had been sown months ago, and they still gnawed at Ned's mind. But he could not act. He had promised himself he would not leave Winterfell. He had refused the handship on the principle of staying in the north. Could he contradict that so soon? "Should we go?" Catelyn asked, standing behind him as she had when the first letter arrived. "Lisa sounds desperate. Whatever the truth, it seems King's Landing is in peril again." "I will not abandon Lisa's pleas," Ned said quietly. "But I cannot ride to King's Landing as hand. Robert has already chosen Renly. Still, perhaps I should travel south, see what truths can be uncovered, if only for a short time. If Jon was murdered, if the Lannisters are plotting something, I can at least confirm it. Robert might not welcome me with open arms, but I doubt he would turn me away." Catelyn turned him by the shoulder gently so he would face her. "We can send someone else, someone we trust, to investigate. You don't have to go yourself. You swore to remain in the north." "The only one with enough weight to glean the truth would be me," Ned replied. "Anyone else I send might be turned away or silenced. This is bigger than merely House Arryn. If the Lannisters are conspiring, if the king is threatened, the entire realm may be thrown into chaos." Catelyn studied his face. "You fear a war?" "I do." He inhaled, letting the musty smell of old parchment fill his lungs. "But I also fear losing the North's shield if I become entangled. I told Robert the First would remain here, but I cannot sit idle if his life is in danger or if someone murdered the man who raised me. I will think on it a few days." Those few days stretched into a week, then two, as conflicting raven letters arrived and new rumors surfaced. Word reached Winterfell that there had been tensions flaring between Lord Tywin and the king's brother, Stannis Baratheon, who was rumored to have left King's Landing abruptly not long after Jon Arryn's death. The seat of Dragonstone was sealed to outsiders, and Stannis had not been present when Renly was named hand. Some said that Stannis believed the children were abominations, but the rumors were conflicting and vague. Each letter that arrived pressed heavier on Ned's conscience. He became consumed by the question. If Robert's heirs were not truly his heirs, then the entire succession was in question. The specter of civil war hovered on the horizon. Ned remembered the madness of the Mad King, the horrors of war that had ripped the realm apart before. Robert had worn the crown for over a decade now, but if his own children were not his, it threatened everything he had built. Renly, meanwhile, was popular but untested for such a high position. And if the Lannisters were truly behind every plot, if they had as many watchers and whisperers in the Red Keep as Lisa's letter suggested, it was only a matter of time until they struck. Finally, Ned resolved to leave. He would ride south with a modest retinue to speak to Robert personally. He would not go to become the Hand. Robert had chosen Renly, but he would try to protect the king as best he could from whatever shadows were gathering. However, As he prepared for the journey, the gods themselves seemed to intervene. A letter arrived, this time sealed with the golden stag of House Baratheon. It was from Renly, the new hand of the king, summoning Ned to King's Landing. Eddard sat alone in the God's Wood that evening, the letter in his hands, reading it in the cool hush beneath the ancient weirwood. Renly's words were formal but imploring. "My Lord Stark," it read, "as hand of the king, I have dire need of your counsel. King Robert is beset on all sides by intrigues, and I know of no man he trusts more than you. I pray you to come to the Red Keep so that we may work together for the good of the realm. Your refusal to serve as hand has caused the king some sadness, but you remain in his heart as a true friend. I beg you, set aside any reservations and return with me, if not to serve as hand, then to serve the realm." Ned felt the weight of duty pressing upon him. This was perhaps the final call. He could not ignore it, and so he made his decision. He would go, speak with Robert, see what lurked in the halls of the Red Keep. He would take only a small party. He had no wish to parade half the North Int. When he told Catelyn, she said, "You know I worry for your safety in the South." "I know," Ned replied, "but I must do this. I will bring the truth to light if I can, and if I can persuade Robert to see it, perhaps we can avert something worse than Jon Arryn's death." Catelyn agreed, though reluctantly. Their farewell was quiet and solemn. She reminded him that the boys and girls needed their father, that the North needed its lord. Ned nodded, promising he would return as soon as he was able. He chose his company, Jory Castle, the captain of his guard, a few trusted men-at-arms, and he considered which of his children, if any, should go. He thought of Sansa, who had always dreamed of the southern courts. But the tension was too high, and Robert's court was no place for illusions. He considered Arya, who would hate the pomp and ceremony but might grow from seeing more of the realm. But she was too wild, too young, and the city too dangerous. In the end, he decided none of his children would go with him. They would remain in the North, safe under Catelyn's watchful eye. So it was that Ned Stark departed Winterfell for the second time in his life, riding south with a sense of foreboding. The journey south was as long as ever, marked by cold nights in small holdfasts, the wind cutting across them from the open fields. It took weeks of travel for them to see the fertile plains of the Riverlands. Along the way, they heard further rumors: a squabble at the small council between Renly and Grand Maester Pycelle, sightings of Tyrion Lannister on the road to the Vale to visit his brother-in-law, or so it was said, and a quiet tension in the Crownlands where roving bandits had begun to appear in numbers not seen in years. At Moat Cailin, Ned paused briefly to inspect the condition of the ancient stronghold, then pressed on. The path led through the Neck, then across the Twins, where Walder Frey demanded courtesy from the Starks passing his bridge. But the old man's cynicism was overshadowed by curiosity, clearly wanting to know why Ned Stark was traveling south months after refusing the king's invitation. Ned offered no details, merely that he was on business for the realm. Frey accepted that without pressing too hard. He had no particular love for the Iron Throne, but he also wouldn't want to draw Ned's ire. When at last the red and gold spires of the city came into view, Ned felt a chill that had nothing to do with weather. King's Landing rose from the horizon, ringed by tall walls and crowned by the Red Keep upon Aegon's high hill. The city was as bustling and chaotic as ever, with narrow streets, beggars, gold cloaks, and the stench of the harbor drifting inland. Ned and his guards wound their way toward the Red Keep, announcing themselves to the sentries. The courtyard inside was bustling with activity. Ned dismounted, looking around. He saw glimpses of red and gold livery, Baratheon and Lannister, and a handful of banners from other noble houses. Before he could take it all in, he heard a familiar voice. "Ned Stark, gods be good, you actually came." Renly Baratheon strode forward, clad in a fine green doublet embroidered with the golden stag of his house, a short black cloak trailing behind him. He wore a bright smile, his dark hair curled and neat. He had the Baratheon look, but with a certain softer grace than Robert. Ned inclined his head. "Lord Renly, or should I say Lord Hand?" Renly laughed, though there was tension in his eyes. This way. We should speak privately." He glanced at Ned's guards. "They will be shown accommodations." Ned followed Renly into the castle, through a maze of corridors. The younger Baratheon soon led him to a small council chamber that was unoccupied. The walls were adorned with tapestries of past kings. A single window let in the mid-afternoon light. "Robert will be pleased you've come," Renly began. "Though you must know he's also still wounded by your refusal. He's put on a show of indifference, but I can tell it troubles him. Still, your arrival might help mend things." "I hope so," Ned said. "But you did not summon me simply to reconcile with Robert." "No," Renly conceded. "Things here are precarious. I was not prepared for the depth of the intrigues. Varys has his little birds. Baelish has his coin. Pycelle drones on about the realm's history while failing to address our present crisis. Joffrey is being groomed day and night by his mother to be an entirely different sort of king. And Robert, well, the king's more interested in hunts and tournaments than in the treasury, which is woefully in debt to the Lannisters. I'm trying to manage all of this, but I lack your steadiness. Ned, I'm not Jon Arryn, nor am I you. Robert respects me enough not to disregard me completely, but he doesn't listen to me the way he might have listened to you." Ned nodded gravely. "I'll help in whatever way I can, but I am not here to take your place. I remain Warden of the North. I cannot stay here indefinitely." Renly stroked his short beard. "I understand. I only ask that you help me keep the realm stable. Dark rumors swirl about my sister-in-law's family. Lord Tywin is quiet at Casterly Rock, but we fear he's marshaling resources. Why else would he sit idle? Joffrey," he paused. "Ned, you were raised alongside Robert. You know him better than any. Don't you see something off about the prince?" Ned hesitated. "I have had questions, yes, but they are dangerous questions. Dangerous or not, if the boy's parentage is in doubt, half the realm's stability is built on a lie. If Robert discovers that Cersei has deceived him, I dread to imagine the fallout. He would kill them all, perhaps. And what of Myrcella, Tommen, innocent children? The realm would be thrown into chaos. House Lannister would not take such a move quietly. And there's still the matter of Daenerys Targaryen across the Narrow Sea, who some say is with child. If that line of Targaryens is not extinguished..." Ned set his jaw. "I came to uncover the truth about Jon Arryn's death. If indeed the Lannisters are behind it, Robert must be told. The question is whether he'll believe it, or if he'll choose to ignore it for fear of the consequences. Perhaps we should speak with Stannis. I heard rumor he left King's Landing before Jon Arryn died. He may know something." Renly's expression tightened. "Stannis is on Dragonstone. He's been in self-imposed isolation since Jon's death. I've sent ravens," he replies in short letters, offering no help. "I suspect he's suspicious that the children are not Robert's, but I can't confirm. My brother is not one to speak plainly about such matters. He believes proof is needed before confrontation. He rarely shares half his thoughts." Ned recalled Stannis from the war, how sober and unyielding he was, like an iron statue. If Stannis believed something was amiss, he would be as relentless as the waves that battered Dragonstone. He would not rest until he had proof that Ned supposed might be either a blessing or a curse. "Where is the king now?" Ned asked. "Likely in the royal apartments or maybe the training yard. He's taken to practicing with a warhammer again, as if he were still young and lean. I suppose he's trying to recapture something he feels is slipping away." Renly exhaled. "He's aged, Ned. His patience is thin, his health is not what it was. Every day he complains of the damnable duties of kingship. He seldom attends council meetings, leaving me to handle affairs. Cersei lurks around him, whispering who knows what." Ned's face was set in grim lines. "I will speak with him soon." They parted ways, and Ned made his way through the Red Keep. Memories of his time here before, after the rebellion, flickered in his mind. He recalled the smell of the throne room, the high ceilings, the pillars. He remembered how Jaime Lannister had sat the Iron Throne after slaying Aerys. It was a city built on secrets, and those secrets had only grown over the years. He found Robert in the courtyard, as Renly had guessed, holding a heavy warhammer and taking clumsy swings at a post. Sweat drenched the king's brow. A few gold cloaks stood by, uneasy and silent. Robert noticed Ned's approach and stopped, panting. "7 hells," Robert muttered, tossing the hammer aside so that it clanged on the stone. "What are you doing here?" Ned bowed his head. "I came at Lord Renly's request." The king's features clouded. He looked older, his hair thinning, his face ruddy, a hint of despair behind his eyes. "So you come now, do you? After I asked you once before." Ned stepped forward. "I came because I heard the realm is in peril, and you are still my friend. I owe you what help I can." Robert spat on the ground, wiping sweat from his brow. He gestured for a servant to bring him a wineskin. He took a long swig before speaking again. "I told you I needed you by my side. You refused me. You let me ride back to this damned city alone. I had to name Renly my hand, and I love my brother, but gods be good, he's no Jon Arryn. The council's a bed of adders. Sometimes I just want to smash them all with my hammer." He lifted an arm, wincing at the weight. "But I'm not the warrior I was." Ned swallowed. "I am sorry. I acted as I thought best for my family and the North. But I will help you now if I can. Renly asked me to find the truth behind Jon's death. If the Lannisters had a hand in it—" "Quiet!" Robert barked, his voice a raw hiss. He glanced around warily, as if expecting shadows to repeat his words. "I'll hear no talk of that here, not in the open. Come with me." He led Ned into a side corridor, dismissing the gold cloaks who tried to follow. They ascended a stairwell, passing 2 guards at the top who stood to attention. Finally, they entered a small solar, and Robert shut the door behind them. "Jon's death," Robert began, leaning against the table as if it might be the only thing holding him upright. "I can't prove anything, but I fear it was no sickness. He was fine, then he was ill, and then he was gone. I remember, Ned, how he used to say, 'The seed is strong.' He said it again, lying on his deathbed, delirious. I had no idea what he meant until later. Now I wonder." Ned inhaled sharply. So Jon had said those words even to Robert. That phrase might be the key. Jon believed your line was strong, the Baratheon line, black of hair. But Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, they are all golden-haired, like Lannisters. Robert turned away, staring out the narrow window. "I see it now. They don't look like me at all. Joffrey is so vain, so cruel. He's no son of mine, or so I fear. Yet if that's true, then my marriage is a lie. My entire claim to the throne passes to Stannis, or perhaps to me alone if I can disinherit them. But think what that means, war. Tywin Lannister will never let his daughter be disgraced. The realm will bleed. And the children. If they are not mine, they are bastards. I'd be within my rights to have them exiled, or worse." Ned saw the torment etched on Robert's face. "It need not come to war if handled carefully, but that requires caution, planning, and proof. You know Stannis will not rest until the matter is settled. Where is he?" "Dragonstone." Robert let out a heavy breath. "I trust Stannis about as much as I trust Cersei, which is to say not at all. He has no love for me, only a sense of duty. He never forgave me for not naming him Lord of Storm's End after the war, or for naming Renly to the King's Council before him. If he sees a chance to claim the throne—" Ned's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "You do him an injustice. Stannis is harsh, yes, but he is just— he fights for the law of the realm, not for personal ambition. If the children truly are bastards, then, by law, your next brother is indeed your heir. That's you or Stannis. Renly is younger, but the question remains, how do we proceed? If we expose Cersei, all the Lannisters will strike. If we do nothing, the realm sits on a powder keg that may explode upon your death." Robert gave a bitter laugh. "If I had half the sense the gods gave a donkey, I would have refused that match. But I needed the Lannisters' gold to secure the throne back then. Now their debts choke us, and their spawn overrun the palace. I don't know what to do, Ned. I'm the king, and yet I feel powerless." Ned placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. "We will find a way. I will speak with Renly, with Varys if I must, and see if we can piece together more evidence. In the meantime, treat Joffrey as your son, even if you suspect otherwise. If war comes, it should not come from your hand too quickly." Robert nodded, though the guilt in his eyes remained. "If I had you as hand from the start, maybe we'd have avoided all this. But it's too late for that now. Look at me, Ned. I'm too fat for my armor, too tired to face the truth. Gods, I miss the open field. I miss the days of the rebellion." Ned gave a mirthless smile. "War is not so glorious, if you recall, but we will do what must be done." So began Ned's new involvement in the intrigues of King's Landing. Though he was not the hand, everyone knew he was the king's oldest friend, and the new hand, Renly, looked to him for counsel. Littlefinger greeted him with sly smiles, acting as though they were old confidants. Varys paid him cryptic compliments about how the realm needed honest men. Grand Maester Pycelle offered half-truths about the final days of Jon Arryn's illness. Jaime Lannister, for his part, was coolly polite whenever they crossed paths, which was seldom. Cersei rarely appeared around Ned, and when she did, she looked at him with quiet loathing, as though she suspected what was in his mind. Days stretched into weeks, and Ned's every step in the city felt like treading on brittle ice. The common folk gossiped about the tensions in the keep. There were murmurs of how Tywin Lannister was massing an army at Casterly Rock, under the pretense of drilling. The Iron Throne's debts grew, and the crown's finances were precarious, especially with the cost of any war. Ned discovered that Robert intended to host a great tournament in honor of Renly's appointment as hand, an expense the treasury could ill afford. Arguing with Robert over finances proved fruitless. The king wanted to drink, whore, and host tournaments as if this were still the first year of his reign. He would wave a dismissive hand at talk of coin, proclaiming that the realm needs diversion, especially now. Renly tried his best to moderate the expenses, but Robert roared about not wanting a half measure. Tension flared behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Ned quietly investigated the last days of Jon Arryn. He visited Pycelle's chambers, where the old man told him the same story as always, that Jon had grown sick suddenly, complaining of a chill in his stomach, that he was tended to with potions and poultices, that in the end, he was delirious, calling out for Robert and repeating, "The seed is strong," but Ned sensed that Pycelle was hiding something. The old maester's watery eyes darted whenever Ned questioned him about the possibility of poison. Pycelle dismissed it as nonsense, but Ned recalled that the tears of Lys were odorless, tasteless, and that the Citadel had records of many subtle poisons. Could Jon Arryn have been fed something that made his illness appear natural? Baelish was another source of half-information. He teased Ned with hints of Jon Arryn's visits to a certain armorer in the city, the same clues Ned recalled from the letters. When Ned went to investigate, he found a black-haired apprentice with the look of a Baratheon. A bastard of Robert's, perhaps. Jon Arryn had been investigating the king's bastards, comparing their dark hair with that of Joffrey's golden locks, building a case about the children's parentage. Ned stood in that cramped forge, his stomach twisting as the truth became more undeniable. When he returned to the keep, he found Renly waiting in his chambers, pacing. The young Baratheon looked agitated, his usual easy humor replaced by urgency. "Ned," Renly said, "we have a problem. Robert is furious about a rumor that spread through the court. It said that the prince's parentage is being questioned. Nobody knows who started it. Cersei is in a rage, insisting that heads will roll. Robert is, well, you can imagine." Ned felt dread clamp around his heart. "It wasn't me. I would never speak such rumors openly. I believe you, but that hardly matters now. The seed's been planted. Cersei is pressing Robert to condemn these rumors as treason, to punish the spreaders severely. Tywin is sending riders from the west, presumably to stand by his daughter. Ned, if this escalates, the city could burn." Ned rubbed his temples, cursing under his breath. "We must calm Robert. If he denounces these rumors publicly, then maybe it will subside. I can keep investigating quietly, but we cannot let this become a public spectacle." "I agree," Renly said, "but Robert is in a black mood. Perhaps you can speak sense into him. If he strikes at Cersei with no proof, or if he tries to declare Joffrey a bastard, Tywin will rebel." Ned nodded gravely, already turning to make his way to the king's quarters. But in the corridor, a figure stepped before him. The man wore a swirling cloak of green and gold, his face half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. Ned stopped short, tension flaring. Then he recognized Varys, the Master of Whisperers, in one of his many disguises. "Lord Stark," Varys said in a soft, simpering voice, "you must tread carefully. The lioness has sharpened her claws, and the king is but a wounded stag. The court is alive with murmurs." Ned's expression hardened. "You would do well to speak plainly." Varys glanced around, then lowered his voice further. "Very well, then. Some in the keep say that Cersei is prepared to claim you have conspired to discredit the royal children. She will paint you as a man who refused the handship and then slithered back to sow discord. If she can convince Robert of that—" "He would never believe such a thing," Ned interrupted, though his voice lacked certainty. Varys smiled thinly. "I would not be so sure. Lord Stark, you must either produce irrefutable proof of these rumors or abandon them. Half-truths will get you nowhere. The king has grown tired of secrets and accusations. He wants peace and a good life. He might accept whatever is simplest to believe, if only to avoid the ugliness of the truth." Ned eyed Varys. "And what do you want from me?" Varys's expression was nearly unreadable, though his eyes flickered with a kind of pity. "I serve the realm, my lord. The realm needs stability. If the truth could spark a war, perhaps a well-intentioned lie is better. Or if a war is inevitable, perhaps it is best it come quickly on your terms. But that is for you and the king to decide." Then Varys bowed and vanished into the shadows, leaving Ned seething. He pressed on, eventually finding Robert in his solar. The king was throwing things about: papers, cups, anything he could lay his hands on, roaring about traitors in the court. 2 guards hovered near the door, not daring to intervene. When Ned stepped inside, Robert paused, chest heaving. "Ned," he shouted, "so you've come to see me now, after the realm is up in arms with these bastard rumors?" Ned shut the door. "Robert, calm yourself, please. You know me." "Do I?" Robert demanded, flinging a goblet aside. "Cersei insists that you're behind these whispers. She claims you've never forgiven her for the past. She says you resent that your sister Lyanna was lost, that House Lannister is overshadowing House Stark. The council is in chaos." Ned's voice rose, uncharacteristically sharp. "You think I would stoop to such a scheme? That I would risk my own life and my family's safety just to insult the queen?" Robert glowered, but his anger was dissipating into weariness. No, I don't believe it. But the question remains. Who is whispering about Joffrey not being my son? If Cersei finds them, they're dead, sure as sunrise. And if the rumor continues to spread, Tywin might muster an army. Can you see the fix I'm in? Ned stepped closer, his voice quieter. "I do. Let me speak plainly. If you want this to end, you must address it head-on. Either announce that Joffrey is your trueborn son or investigate the matter thoroughly. If he is truly your son, you have nothing to fear. But if he is not—" Robert placed a hand over his eyes, as if trying to blot out the world. I can't do this, Ned. I can't face this." He let out a ragged breath. "I'll go mad. I'll kill them all. That's what I do. Isn't it? I kill. Gods have mercy. I never wanted to be king." Ned's heart ached for his friend. "Then let us be cautious. Let me gather proof. If it is proven beyond doubt that the children are not yours, you must decide how to act. Until then, say nothing. Let Renly handle the rumor. Call it treason without naming names. If the people need a scapegoat, blame faceless malcontents. But do not act against Cersei or the children until you are certain of the truth. That is all I can advise." Robert stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I'll trust you, Ned, but only so far as I can throw you. If war comes of this, I'll hold you responsible." With that ominous declaration, Ned made his exit. The days that followed were a dance of tension. Renly tried to quell the rumors, ordering gold cloaks to arrest a few fools who publicly questioned Joffrey's parentage. Meanwhile, Ned continued his quiet investigation, retracing Jon Arryn's steps, speaking with those who might have seen him in his final days. Each clue confirmed the same notion. Jon discovered that Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were fathered by Jaime Lannister, not Robert. Baelish dropped hints that Ned was not the only one chasing that truth. Agents close to Stannis had been in the city, though they left around the time Ned arrived. Varys whispered that Cersei was growing desperate. The Queen had made visits to Pycelle, to Baelish, to the King, to the Gold Cloaks, evidently trying to shore up her position. Jaime Lannister, though frequently out on some excuse or another, seemed to be preparing for a confrontation as well. On the day Ned finally found the conclusive piece of evidence, an old genealogical scroll in the royal library that proved beyond doubt that every Baratheon child for centuries had black hair, Renly came to him in a panic. "She knows," Renly said, breathless, bursting into Ned's chamber unannounced. "Cersei knows you have the truth. She's calling for your head. She wants Robert to name you a traitor." Ned's stomach sank. What does Robert say? He's confused, drunk, and outraged. I tried to speak to him, but Cersei cornered him first. She claims you are plotting against the crown, that you mean to dethrone Joffrey. She's demanding you be seized immediately. Ned grimaced. So the moment has come. Does Robert believe her? Renly grabbed Ned's arm, voice urgent. "He's uncertain. I think you must flee the city, Ned. He might still be convinced to hush this up. But if you stay, she will have you arrested. Once you're in the dungeons, she'll manipulate him further." Ned felt a cold certainty in his bones. "If I run, I betray my friend and the realm's best chance at the truth. This truth will come out eventually. Perhaps it is better that I stand my ground now while I can." Renly's eyes were wide. "You stand your ground, you might lose your head. If Robert does not protect you, Cersei will. She won't hesitate. She's a lioness defending her cubs. Let me help you. We can gather men loyal to the king, to me. We'll seize Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, keep them safe until Robert decides what to do. In one swift move, we can stifle the Lannister power in the city." Ned recoiled slightly. "Renly, that would be kidnapping the royal children. They are not to blame for their parents' sins. And if I align with you openly, that might be seen as treason." "Better a little treason than losing your head," Renly retorted. "Time is not on our side. Cersei moves quickly. Jaime may already be bringing gold cloaks or Lannister men into the city. If we don't act, we'll be drowned in their wave." Ned's mind raced. War was upon them if they acted too rashly. If they seized the children, Tywin Lannister would march. The city might be consumed in bloodshed. Yet if he did nothing, he might be captured. Robert's inaction or confusion would give Cersei the opening she needed to keep power. The realm might be spared a war in the short term, but the lie on the throne would remain. Stannis might declare himself rightful king. Then it would all unravel anyway. "Give me time to speak with Robert," Ned said. "I won't join in abducting the children. That is not the way. If Robert stands by me, we can bring Cersei to a quiet resolution. If not, perhaps I should leave, gather the north. I promised Robert I'd bring men if the realm was threatened. Now the realm is threatened from within." Renly cursed under his breath. "Time is the one thing we do not have, Ned. But I won't force your hand. I'll rally those who might stand with me, in case the worst occurs." He left. Ned knew that if matters fell apart, Renly might well attempt to claim the throne for himself, or else rally behind Stannis. The lines were becoming dangerously blurred. Ned's loyalty was to Robert, but Robert was spiraling, and Cersei was cunning. Tyrion Lannister, wherever he was, might also be weaving his own game. War felt imminent. That night, Ned received a covert message from King Robert. It was a single line scrawled on a scrap of paper, Come to me in the throne room at sunrise, alone. Ned's heart thundered as he read it. Perhaps Robert had come to his senses, or perhaps it was a trap. He had no choice but to go. Dawn broke over King's Landing in a sullen gray light. Ned made his way to the throne room. The high, cavernous hall was quiet, the iron throne looming at the far end like a monstrous metal beast. Robert stood there, not seated, dressed in hunting leathers and wearing a grim expression. A handful of gold cloaks lined the walls. When Ned approached, Robert lifted a hand. "No closer." Ned halted, alarm flickering in his eyes. "Robert." The king's voice was low, thick. "Tell me the truth, Ned. Is Joffrey my son?" Ned closed his eyes. He could lie, spare them all, but he had promised to be Robert's true friend. "No," he said quietly. "He is not." The gold cloaks shifted uneasily. Robert's face contorted with fury, heartbreak, and despair. He strode forward, grabbing Ned by the front of his tunic. "Seven hells, Ned. This can't be true. It can't. The realm would tear itself apart." Ned's voice trembled with pity. "I'm sorry, Robert. Jon Arryn died for this. He discovered the truth, and they murdered him before he could reveal it. I believe Cersei and Jaime are the parents of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen." Robert's entire body shook. He shoved Ned away, stumbling back himself. He let out a roar that echoed in the hall. Then, in a ragged whisper, he said, "I want them gone. Every Lannister. I'll kill them. Suddenly, a door slammed open. Cersei Lannister swept into the throne room, flanked by a contingent of gold cloaks. Jaime Lannister was at her side, a hand on his sword. The guards in the hall stepped forward, confusion plain on their faces. "My lord husband," Cersei said, voice loud and commanding. "I have come to defend my children from slander." Robert turned to her, eyes blazing. "You dare come here?" He let out a bitter laugh. "What am I saying? Of course you dare. You always dare." Cersei stood tall, her green eyes fierce. "You're believing that northern traitor over me, the mother of your heirs? You have no proof, no." "Stop lying," Robert roared. "I know the truth. Gods have mercy on you and your brother. I know." In that moment, Jaime Lannister stepped forward. "Your Grace," he began, but Robert drew a dagger from his belt with a snarl. The gold cloaks moved as if to intervene, but everyone was uncertain whom to obey. Ned's heart pounded. War was about to erupt right there in the throne room. He put a hand on his sword, hoping it wouldn't come to that. "Robert, think. We need to handle this carefully." Robert was past reason. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the fear of civil war had cracked something in him. He lunged toward Jaime, dagger raised, but Jaime, quick as a cat, drew his sword and parried. Metal clanged, and in the echoing hall, the gold cloaks shouted in alarm. Cersei screamed, "Kingslayer, do not harm him," but Robert, fueled by rage, swung again. Jaime had no choice but to defend himself. A savage exchange of blows erupted. Jaime, the more skilled swordsman, deflected the king's wild strikes, but Robert was strong, and Ned feared the man would not stop until blood was spilled. Ned moved to intervene, stepping between them. "Stop, in the name of—" But before he could finish, Robert's warhammer, strapped to his back, swung around as Robert tried to hurl Jaime aside. The king's weapon struck Ned. Ned felt white-hot pain lance through his shoulder. He staggered back, the force sending him to the floor. Blood stained his tunic. The gold cloaks cried out. Some rushed forward. Jaime hesitated, sword raised. "Your Grace, we must." Robert, breathing heavily, turned to see Ned lying on the ground. His eyes cleared as though waking from a nightmare. "Ned!" He let out a ragged gasp and dropped his dagger, stumbling to Ned's side. "Seven hells? Did I strike you?" Ned grimaced, trying to hold back the pain. It's nothing. A flesh wound." Cersei, seeing her chance, shouted to the gold cloaks, "Arrest him. He's conspired with the king's enemies." Look what he's done to Lord Stark. They are traitors. The gold cloaks wavered, uncertain whom to obey. Some turned to Robert. The king's expression was tormented. I struck him by accident, Robert managed. He is no traitor. Guards, stand down. Jaime lowered his sword, glaring at Ned. But he did not move to harm him further. Cersei's voice rose, dripping with venom. Your Grace, he has slandered your children. He's tearing the realm apart. Robert whipped around on her. You dare speak of my children as if they're mine? Lying bitch. He advanced on her, but Jaime put himself between them, sword still in hand. Another storm of confusion among the guards. Some brandished weapons at Jaime, others at Robert. Ned struggled to stand, ignoring the stabbing pain in his shoulder. Your Grace, this is not the way, he said, voice strained. Order them to lay down arms. Summon Renly and the council. We must handle this quietly. Robert stared at Ned with wild eyes. Then something in him settled. He raised both hands, calling to the gold cloaks. Put up your steel, all of you. After a heartbeat, the guards obeyed. Jaime lowered his sword, though his face was pale with anger. Cersei seethed silently, but she did not speak. Summon Renly, Robert rasped. Summon the council. We settle this here and now. He glared at Jaime. You stay where I can see you. Someone tend to Ned. Ned sank down, letting out a shuddering breath as a guard rushed forward with a cloth to press to his wound. His mind reeled at how close they had come to mortal violence. War hovered in the air like a reaper's scythe, waiting for a single misstep. He could not imagine how this would resolve. Cersei would never admit to her children's illegitimacy. Robert, now that he knew, could not stomach the lie. Jaime was at the Queen's side, defending her. Renly might see an opportunity to press his claim or Stannis' claim. Tywin Lannister would not stand idle once word reached him. The North was far away, but its lord was here in the midst of a gathering storm. Ned closed his eyes. He had refused the handship, hoping to spare himself and his family from the deadly games of the South. Yet here he was in the center of it. As the pain throbbed through his shoulder and the throne room buzzed with frantic confusion, he wondered if there was any path left that did not lead to bloodshed. And he thought of his children, safe at Winterfell for now, praying that they would remain untouched by the calamities unfolding in King's Landing. He whispered a silent vow that, come what may, he would see them again. But even then, in his heart, he knew that the wars of the South had a way of reaching across the entire realm. And the North, whether he liked it or not, was about to be called upon in ways he had hoped never to see again. There was no escaping the tides of fate, not for Eddard Stark, nor for House Stark, nor for the realm itself.